How you doing? I'm so stoked people stayed till 5, because if you compete against like beer, you're done. All right, it's 5 o'clock, so I'm gonna do something later with an exercise, so we're gonna rehearse it here, okay? I'm gonna go like this, right after I ask you to make whatever sound you'd like. So again, I'm not gonna say like, stand up and yell, but if you wanna yell, you can, all right? But I wanna also practice, then please to be quiet when I do that, okay? Ready, so go ahead, make any noise you'd like. Ready, go, now, make the noise. Nicely done, even in this huge room. Okay, well, I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much for the invite from the organizers. I'm gonna talk about artificial intelligence, specifically Heartificial intelligence, because sadly, I'm addicted to the puns. And mostly what I'm gonna talk today about is values, and how our human values relate to what we are actually building into our algorithms and machines. So this is the central question from my book, which is, how will machines know what we value if we don't know ourselves? And it's meant to be kind of a double entendre, meaning if we don't know ourselves, etc. And let me ask you this, just yell out if you would, like one word, and there's no wrong words here, yell out a value. It can be like friendship, kindness, and I should say if it's like murder, then just please go to the side. But just anything, go ahead, yell it out. What are your values? Honesty? Truth? Was that empathy or apathy? Okay, because I just want to, I'd lean towards empathy. Compassion. Okay, I do this talk all the time, or I've done it a lot because I love talking about values. And what I find is that people, myself included, we don't get asked the question about our values that often. So typically, if I really push people, individual people, to give me a list of 10 values that they also live to, and they can tell me how they know that they live to those values, usually they're like, okay, number 1, faith. Number 2, music. Number 3, friendship. Number 4, music. Did I say music? Number 5, Game of Thrones. And I'm like, cool, I'm also a fan. But a lot of my work has also been studying why we value certain things, because we're asked to measure them, and then understanding that the things that we measure or that we don't are also what we value or don't. And if I was to ask you, for instance, how much money you had in your pocket, or maybe your bank account, and maybe this is because I'm from the States, so this is true in the States often, you'd probably know to a pretty, maybe even the dollar or the euro, how much money you had in the bank, which is good, you should. But that reflects a value that we've been trained to think about first. And let me ask you this, when's the last time in 6 months, raise your hand if you would, that someone has said to you, what are your values and how do you know? So in the past 6 months, has someone asked you about your value? I'm sorry. If no one has asked you about your values in that way, please raise your hand. Yeah. My mission is to make sure you never raise your hand again when that question's asked. Okay. My book, Heartificial Intelligence, Embracing Our Humanity to Maximize Machines. I asked you about your values. We're going to do a little exercise later on where I want to find out more about your values. But now, to show you an incredibly technological way to identify your values, I've brought an insanely technical thing to demonstrate my values. And if you weren't guessing, that's sort of a joke, because my thing is a harmonica. Here we go. I value music, and I try to play music every single day. And to the great sound people behind me on stage, as a reminder, I'm now about to play harmonica. So here you go. Where you clap. Ready? 1, 2, 3, keep on, come on. Come on, pretend it's like 10:30. Thank you very much. You do not get to play in a room this big that often, so that was cool. Thank you very much. I brought that up because I know that I need music in my life. Music is a value to me. It brings catharsis. If I don't play music enough, I start to get sad, even though I play blues. So there's an irony. But my point is that I'm aware of it. I was an actor in New York City. It was a Broadway show. I did TV. I played a cop about 6 times on Law & Order. So if you have a fake crime later today, right here, come to this guy. By the way, on Law & Order, I always played what they called officer exposition, because we never had any real lines, the leads did. So I'd be like, yeah, 7, she's bloody, next door, Nantucket Street, and I'd leave. That was my whole scene. Okay, so Madeline was kind enough to introduce me a little bit. I have the pleasure of working with an organization called IEEE, which is the world's largest professional technical organization. It was founded by Thomas Edison well over 100 years ago. It is, with no exaggeration, the world's largest. It's the heart of the global engineering community. It has members in over 160 countries, and the work that I lead has about 500 people that helped create this book on the left called Ethically Aligned Design. It's available for free. IEEE is a nonprofit. It's a Creative Commons document. I'd love if you wanted to get it. On Twitter, you can get in touch with me at John C. Havens. Love for you to get this book. Why I'm so proud of it is we released it in 3 iterations. The first 2 versions we released as requests for input. And I'm really thrilled we did that, because the first version, for instance, we had a lot of people say this is a great resource talking about personal data, effective computing, law, all these great subjects. But we heard a lot of people saying it feels very Western, which is true. We had mainly people from the UK, the EU, and the US do version 1. So version 2, we brought in a bunch of people. We're thrilled to have people from China and South Korea and Japan. And now we have this chapter on classical ethics, which I love, classical ethics in AI, because, for instance, coming from the West, we tend to be, I say we meaning Europe and the States, I'm from the States, very focused on the individual, from Greek ethics. However, in China and the East, a lot of times the focus is on the collective. Or there's a beautiful tradition in Africa called Ubuntu ethics, where my well-being doesn't start until I know yours. And I bring this up because a lot of time there's good focus on things like bias, on understanding bias. A lower paradigm than that even, or a deeper paradigm, is to understand bias, first of all, is not always a synonym for bad. It's a synonym for values. And if you don't know those even kind of high-level, paradigmic-level values, you should. This is just a flow of our book, and it's really, like I said, more of a resource. And I want to let you know also, I think there's this temptation. There's a lot of fantastic AI principles around today, and we're thrilled that our book was used for them. I think there's a temptation to think like, list your principles, nod your head, and you're good to go, right? And I'm only laughing because saying the principles is awesome. Living them and working through them and discussing with colleagues to make them work is hard. And you can see from left to right how we feel about the work we've done. And by the way, we're not finished. We welcome anyone to work with us. You don't have to be a member of IEEE to join. Again, get in touch with me. We'd love to have you on our work groups. It's all volunteer-based. Okay. But I should say these views are my own. There's my disclaimer. Okay. I ran a nonprofit, as Madeline mentioned, and ever since I lost my dad in 2011, I've been very focused on this idea of understanding other people's pain. My dad was a psychiatrist. If you know traditional psychiatry, there's this idea that we're all sort of a vase, right? Pretend this is a vase. And we all have our different life experiences, but we also have pain. And that pain is like the liquid in the vase. And if you have a good therapist, or you understand the need to talk about mental health, which is critical in this day and age, then you can take that pain and in one sense sort of pour out the pain, right? That's the goal of traditional psychoanalysis. But I now have fallen in love with this idea of what's called positive psychology. It's an empiric science. And for the last 30 years, things like understanding gratitude, being grateful for what and who you are now, that can improve your mental health. And if you go to the gym and work out, and I say, hey, you have to go to the gym and eat healthy for your physical health, that's a given. It's shocking to me, and I've been blessed because my dad was a psychiatrist. My mom still is a minister, so I think I've just had the gift of having more introspective types around me. But if we don't live to our values, then our well-being decreases, and if we don't take care of our mental health, it won't take care of itself. So one way to do that is this, which this screen here behind me, you can see we based these 12 values on a wonderful guy's work. His name is Schwartz. And Professor Schwartz around the world, it's pretty well known, mapped these 12 words, which are common words to everyone's values on the planet. Now, that doesn't mean that the people feel the same way about these words, family, etc. But he identified these 12 words in this major study that says these 12 are a kind of good bucket of our human experience. One thing is I'm talking, look at those words. Remember that just now I told you that exercise about like when's the last time somebody asked you about your values and do you know? Well, this is a great thing if you want to do it at home, which is take those 12 words and at a scale of 1 to 10, give yourself like a life values estimation. And it's funny, like most dating apps, I've been happily married for over 20 years. I would have loved a dating app. I just didn't have it at the time. My dating app was a brunch. That's where I met my wife. I would love a dating app, but many of them, the services like eHarmony, you enter in 500 pieces of data about who you are before your first date, which is great. So this is only 12. But the logic is look at these words, and there's no wrong answer for you, meaning say nature, you love being outside. So nature is like a 10. And family, maybe you're at an age where you're not married or you're not with someone, so family's like a 2. And what we did with this, about 100 people, it wasn't that many, but we said do that first landscape of who you are. And then what we did is for the next 3 weeks, at the end of every day, we said, how much did you live to those values? And it was the same thing, 0 to 10. If you didn't live to them at all, that's a 0, and that's fine. You didn't go outside at all, so nature is 0. If you lived really, like all you did that day was you're outside, then that's a 10. Then at the end of 3 weeks, we just aggregated the responses, divided by 21 days, and we gave them a lived values score. And we had 99% of the people, it was 100, so it was pretty easy, 99 of the people said that they felt their long-term, it's called flourishing. It's not just mood, but their flourishing increased because they were asked about their values and then they tracked them. And because it was a pretty typical 3 weeks, we said try to make sure you're not traveling or there's something special happening. What we were also able to show people is if you said a number is like a 7 at the beginning or a 9, and then it was a 3 after 3 weeks, this is a good time for an insight. Maybe you thought nature was a huge deal and it's not. Or maybe nature is a huge deal and you're not doing what you need to do for your mental health and your values to improve them. It was never intended to be condemnatory. So I spent this much time on this before I got into the robots and the AI because I think there's an easy way to get sort of focused on algorithms and robots and all that stuff. And I love all the algos and the robots because I'm a huge geek. And I got into this space because I wrote this book because back in 2015 I was writing for Mashable and I kept interviewing CIOs, CEOs, many different types of companies. And maybe I was an idiot, but I was like, hey, where's the code of ethics for AI? Like, what part of the web is it on? Like, is it letter M? Where can I find the code? No one had one. And they kept saying, well, we like Asimov's laws of robotics. Now, I love every dystopian show ever, and I'm 50, so I may know more than you do, right? So, and this isn't dystopian, but Asimov wrote that short story in the 1950s to demonstrate the conundrum of having only a list of principles that would serve every context. So anyway, I realized I think this is a good opportunity to have a code of ethics for AI. But for those of you who may not know how human-computer interaction or this type of robotics works, my friend Edson, who's from Brazil, gave me a great example. Because when I first met him, I'm like, how do you imbue values into machines? He said, be very careful. You aren't actually putting values into the machines. You're taking machines, putting them in the context of someone else, and their values may be reflected by it. Meaning you might have seen Pepper downstairs. Yeah, Pepper's very cool. I love watching people watching Pepper. I do it a lot, you know, people laugh and whatever. But anyway, Edson gave me the example. He said, so he's from Brazil. He said, I know if I build a robot that's based for a Western audience, in general, we look at each other's eyes as a sign of respect when we speak in the West. He said in China and other Asian cultures, it's rude to look someone in the eye, so you look down as a sign of respect. So he said, values and all these deep questions about AI and ethics, sometimes it's a lot more simple. If you build a robot for the States, and then you ship that same robot to an Asian market, people may be like, oh my God, and you'll freak them out. So he says a lot of it is about culturally understanding who you're building for and honoring their end user values. So that's a quick introduction. I don't have enough time to go into this too much, but a friend of mine who runs the Affectiva company, I was just at MIT a couple of days ago. This technology is amazing in terms of helping recognize what's called micro-expressions. But the thing about technology is it's neither good nor evil, but it's also not inert. And I won't go into facial recognition. There's a lot of issues with those things today. But this tool was originally, the co-founder of this company created it to help people with Asperger's syndrome. And Asperger's is where you can't recognize someone else's emotional cues. It can be very frustrating because you don't realize someone's getting angry, for instance. So they built a tool, or Roz, who is the woman I'm speaking to, is a co-founder of this company, built a tool where on someone's glasses, it's essentially augmented reality, a person with Asperger's can be speaking with someone and using this micro-expression technology, ask the person who's speaking if someone else starts to get angry, there's a little light, green, yellow, and red, like a stoplight in the States. And it goes from green to yellow if the person starts to make this sort of face. And you can actually see text that says, I think they may be getting angry, which I think is awesome. And I think about if this technology starts to become pervasive, the value of actual emotional intelligence, helping us listen better to each other, empathy, could be vastly improved as long as we don't only rely on the technology. All right, I have 10 minutes left. So one thing we often don't talk about with regards to autonomous and intelligent systems is data. A lot of conversation around AI and ethics focuses on bias of algorithms, which it should. But a sort of ultimate bias is this sense that our data is not that worthy, so you can just give it away. And we've been sort of trained to click consent until the mighty GDPR was formed here in Europe. Thank you so much for the GDPR from the States. But I bring up this slide. This was from the UK about 7 years ago. A privacy-oriented company put a free Wi-Fi hotspot on a public street in London. And they said, free Wi-Fi, come and grab some coffee. And they had about a 4-page terms and conditions. This was on page 1 with big bold letters. And it said, if you want to use this Wi-Fi, cool, but then we have your firstborn child. It both makes me laugh and it also terrifies me because 60 people signed up, 60. So we can't go into a future where there's this logic of, hey, it's your responsibility to know what you read. Of course, that's something that we should not eschew. I mean, that's a good thing to have. But when it's 30 or 40 pages written by a phalanx of lawyers, and then the answer is, well, you shouldn't have signed that. That's not how we want to move forward in the algorithmic age. We cannot move forward that way. And I've written 2 books on this subject of privacy and all this stuff. And the question I always get asked is, what are you afraid to hide? And my first response is, are you kidding me? Of course I have stuff to hide. Pictures from college, myself naked, that horse, whatever it is. It's like there's things that you don't want to share. But more importantly, in this era, the question I like to ask instead of what is ours to hide is this: what is ours to reveal? I have 2 kids. You know what we get to say about ourselves? Our faith. You know what we get to say about ourselves? Whether we're Democratic or Republican. You know what we get to say about ourselves? Whether we're gay, right? Why do I bring these things up? These are your values. These are your subjective truths. I would never deign to tell you what your values are, but I am fighting tooth and nail to make sure that you have the ability and right to do that. That's work that I am doing right now. And I'm going to go back to this quick. There's a whole ecosystem there that is not anti-business. It is not anti-government, and it is certainly not anti-programmer. It's the opposite. I know so many programmers focusing on blockchain, smart contracts, the spatial web, augmented and virtual reality, where the phrase I use is clarity with data. Clarity and parity. The clarity is you knowing, and I believe this, all humans have worth. I learned this from my dad and my mom. This is my belief. I believe all humans have worth. When's the last time someone said that? When's the last time someone said that to you? I was a fat kid on the playground. I would have loved more kids to say that to me more often. But beyond the fact that I believe you have worth, I know that your data represents who you are and your identity, and you deserve the right to access that data and share it in ways that make sense for you, especially before we get into the beautiful augmented and virtual reality worlds like the metaverse that John Romero entered earlier. I read Ready Player One the second it came out. I know Stone crashed for years. I can't wait. But I also know when we walk from here to here, this reality to that, it can't be with click consent. Cool, good to go. No, it's got to be welcome. Do you understand what's going to happen when you come in here? Do you understand what your values are? And have you protected them? Now you can come in here and have a great time. Okay, I have 6 minutes left. And remember I did this little gesture earlier? I want you to turn to the person next to you. You don't have to get up. If you're drinking coffee, I know, believe me, I do this all the time. I want you just to turn to the person next to you, and if you would, just so I can wrap up with like 2 minutes of a talk. When you see me waving frantically in about 4 minutes and go like this, just look back up. But turn to the person next to you and ask them, what are your values? And the next person will give you a pretty short answer, 1 or 2 words or a sentence. It could be like, I value friendship, right? Then the first person asks them, how do you know? And that's it. So pick a person A, pick a person B, and there you go. And like I said, in about 4 minutes, you'll see me waving crazily up here. Go ahead. Picture if they let me.
We have to learn how to do these things.
Right. Wow. That's hard because you're 27. I don't know how you do that. All right, and if you haven't switched, please make sure to switch so both people get to answer. All right, and you ready? Here you go, here you go. And you can wrap up at the party at 6. And boom. Now, I value your privacy. I was going to take a picture of you and tweet it from stage. Is that cool, center section? Is there anyone that doesn't want me to tweet their picture? Okay, then ready? Here in the middle. Oh, off to the side. I have you two. Ready? On 3. And you all have to say cheese on 3. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Cheese. Sweet. I need all your Twitter handles. Okay, we'll do that later. Thank you for doing that exercise. It means a great deal to me because I miss my dad a lot. And I realized my mom and dad, we figured out one time, my dad spent 50,000 hours toe-to-toe with people asking them what their problems were. To be fair, it was his job as a psychiatrist. But I also think that question about who we are and what our values are, especially in the work that I do. I work with so many magnificent programmers, data scientists, engineers. I am so deeply honored to work with people who, frankly, I was an actor for years, I'm still a writer. We have very different ways of thinking, and it's beautiful. Madeline was kind enough to mention the thing that my dad said not long before he died, which is, I've learned to be comfortable in mystery. And that moves me a great deal. And there's mystery in meeting people. There's mystery in understanding other people's values. It is hard. I'd be a hypocrite if I said that I never got upset about other people's values, but there's magic in trying. To close, a friend of mine, I spoke at Google a couple of weeks ago, and she asked us to answer this question: what's my dream for the future of humanity? Anybody here know about the UN Sustainable Development Goals? All right, this is an awesome effort, and this beautiful picture shows 17 different goals. The reason I like showing this picture first is I mentioned, knowing about your bank account before. There's these 3 letters, the GDP, which I've spoken about for years. It's not that GDP is wrong or bad, it's just that it's very finite, and it measures productivity and exponential growth fairly well. What it doesn't measure is things like the environment. What it doesn't measure is caregiving. And since women are the primary caregivers of children around the world, the whole world, what that also means then, in one sense, is the GDP doesn't measure women. And why that matters is if we build these glorious tools, AI, autonomous and intelligent systems, and we say AI for good, then my answer is, what do you mean by good? Who's good? And at the very simplest way to think about this, there's this idea of the triple bottom line, right? There's profit, because you got to have money. Money's cool. I like buying stuff. But we must also focus on the planet, right? And not just like, well, I hope the tree survives. No. This is a big time to make the planet flourish and prioritize it. And same with people, things like mental health, as I mentioned before. These 5 words are the words that I think could destroy humanity, which is, did we hit our numbers? If every quarter the main question we're asking in boardrooms, I used to be an EVP of a top 10 PR firm, I get it. It's good people making good decisions about the values of the products they make. However, if the question, did we hit our numbers, is what we base the first decisions about what we're going to do next, that's when humanity is done. Because we're finite. Even if we do all these beautiful things to ourselves, we and the environment are finite. Doesn't mean we're bad. But the question I like to ask, instead of did we hit our numbers, is did we help our brothers and sisters and Mother Earth? And with that, thank you very much.